Thank you very much, Ziggy Noodleman. I'll never look at bubbles the same way again. Well, folks, here we are in day 3 of the 37th annual Murray Schwartz Chalamoid Sukkos Telethon for the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene, and we're just about hitting the home stretch. Do you think I could get a cup of coffee over here? A shadam dank. Folks, we're going to push on through, and if you keep making those donations, we'll be sure to top our... Hello, Marcello. How are you, darling? And Antoinette and the little ones? Fabulous. Listen, Marcello, I'm calling because I want you to make a donation from my foundation to National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene. Yes, I've been watching the telethon and enjoying it immensely. Just go to nytf.org and click on the donate button. Well, yes, of course it's tax deductible. I don't know. How much did we give to the UJA? Well, you're my accountant. Can't you look it up? Thank you. Yes, let's give that same amount. Thank you, darling. Ciao. And now, folks, here's something I know you are really going to enjoy. Bud Mishkin in conversation with Frank London and Lorin Sklamberg of the Grammy Award-winning Klezmatics.
Hi everyone, I'm Bud Mishkin, and welcome to yet another edition of the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene live program, a great program that's been going on remotely during this time of the pandemic. And it is a real treat to be joined today by two of the co-founders of the Klezmatics, Lorin Sklamberg and Frank London. 34 years ago, the Klezmatics were formed in 1986. And quite honestly, when many of us think of klezmer music, we think initially, there's a whole world of it, of course, but we think initially of the Klezmatics.
In Yom Kippur sind Mendilet und jedes bei sich gerecht. Yom Kippur geht Gott weg seine Chile, wie Freifels Käuf, Psyche Sedile. Ein ganzen Tag geht mit in die Sorten und nach der Nacht essen ein Zicker Flocken. Ach wie wohl, in ach wie geht's, ist zu sein Ayid. Ach wie wohl, und ach wie geht's, ist zu sein Ayid.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today remotely. Lorin, we'll start with you. How is life for a musician in the pandemic?
Interestingly enough, I, sort of been channeled into doing, things that I haven't done before. So it's been my musical life has sort of moved in the direction of some different sorts of collaborations and inspirations. My other hat is that I'm the sound archivist at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. So I've also, been doing that work, but remotely for the most part. In a way, I try and focus on the positive parts of it. Part of that was that we have three kids who are in their second year. Two of them are in their second year of college. The other one just started as a senior, and we actually, had them living various accommodations of them living here for much of what's been going on since March. So that was kind of cool and great. So, I like I said, it's like I like to focus on the sort of the positive things that have come out of this for me and for my family.
What are some of the things you've been doing professionally that, had you been out on the road or doing concerts as the Klezmatics, that you've had a chance to do?
I've written a song or two. There's been one of the things that's happened is that the pandemic has um, inspired different groups in my case, Yiddish singer or Yiddish musicians to come together in different sorts of ways, in forums and in collaborative efforts via Zoom and such. So I involved in a singing consortium of about 35 singers who were presenting concerts online. Uh, Twice weekly. So I did that. I've done some collaborations and it allows you, even though you can't do it at the same time, it allows you to have collaborations with people who live very, very far away. I have friends who were um, because of circumstances who they live in Berlin, but they ended up spending months in Scotland. So I ended up doing some stuff online with them. Uh, the the band has created a music video remotely, and also we were able to play our first socially distanced concert actually in person for a very appreciative audience in Connecticut, which was very, well thought out and planned and such. Um, and the other thing is that our band, the Klezmatics, we decided a couple of weeks ago that we would uh, have each of us take on once a week, making some sort of post on Instagram and Facebook and sharing it. So that's given me the opportunity to prepare some little musical things, and in my case, related to what's going on. I I did one song where I took a Yiddish theater song about uh, about women voting that was written in the 1920s, and I changed the words around and made it about that we need to vote now. And I also did a tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg this past week.
Wow.
So so those are the things that I've been up to, and the band's been up to.
Frank, how about you? The notion, at least initially, of not being able to play out in front of live audiences. I think we know the answer to this question, but as someone whose life is about music and part of that is a reaction from an audience, what was that like, at least in the first several months of the pandemic before you had this first socially distant concert?
It's interesting you asked the question that way, Bud, because that particular thing, the audience reaction, is not the thing that motivates me and my art and music, and it's not the thing that I miss. I mean, my life is totally upside down, different than it's been in my over 40 years of being a professional musician. I've never been in my home or in any one place for 6 months ever in 40 years. Um, uh, Generally, I spend over half the year traveling and performing. Uh, it's For me, audience is a conversation. So in a sense, the conversation we're having now is the same as playing in front of an audience in terms of that. But it's the actual playing with other musicians that I miss. Of course, also I can't make a living, which came from playing and performing. So the traveling is gone. The being at home. Thank God, my family. We realized that we actually really like each other. So that's been maybe the biggest gift. Is like, even though we've never been together as a family for 6 months in a row, we actually get along really well, and it's really great. We watch lots of movies and we cook lots of food, so that's a gift. But yeah, what's been hardest is not playing with people and not making a living. And what's been most different is that and not traveling. So it's crazy, but it is what it is. And as Lorin was saying, it has forced me and into new directions that I didn't expect. I'm not someone who's going to say, oh, it's so much, I'm so glad this happened so that I could do that, you know. I mean, especially I was just talking with someone that people are already forgetting how it was in New York back in March and April, how insane it was, where, I mean, you know, you talk to people in other places and they didn't understand it, and all these crazy lunatics who think that this is some conspiracy, and they don't know about the hospital rooms being flooded, and friends of ours who sadly either got sick or even some passed away prematurely from this. So, and now it's almost forgotten, but no, it's not like there's anything good about this situation. But
No.
we're creative people, and I think the need to be creative didn't go away for 1 second, and I put my focus and energy mostly into, I taught myself, I've never done home recording before, I've never made a video before. I've probably made in one way or another about 30 or 40 video pieces, klezmer, not klezmer, Yiddish, not Yiddish, things where it's the musicians being filmed like a live concert or like a filmed concert, to collaborations with artists in different genres and making it. I've made things with painters. The Klezmatics were supposed to have been playing with the Dance Theater of Harlem at City Center. That got canceled, postponed, canceled. But thanks to our violinist Lisa Gutkin's initiative, we did a special program, an internet program, where each individual klezmatic hooked up with with an individual dancer from the Dance Theater of Harlem, and did a separate duet piece. And Lorin did a live piece, and I made a dance video with Crystal Serrano from the Dance Theater of Harlem. So 30, 40 videos focusing on cantorial music, klezmer trumpet duets, a series of like 8 klezmer trumpet duets, 3 major concerts, of which Lorin was part of 2 of them that got filmed, you know, and still working more and more. And it's also interesting thinking as Jews, the calendar. So the first major holiday in the pandemic was Passover, was Pesach. And we did our seders online, and it was, we managed to create something that felt viable. I mean, I don't want to do it again, but it was nice that we were talking with people all over the world and celebrating together. And I made a video with Sarah Gordon of a Yiddish Passover song, Often Kneel. And I made a couple, I've been making trumpet cantorial videos that go with the holidays. So I did some Passover stuff, and just this last week, partially for what Lorin was saying, the Klezmatics weekly thing, I did a Rosh Hashanah piece with shofars and the music and text of Barosh Hashanah. And then just today, I've just dropped my sort of psychedelic Kol Nidre on the world. So you know, so it's like secular stuff, Jewish stuff, Yiddish stuff, art world stuff, just trying to be creative. And that's the thing that I learned that about myself, is that the thing that drives me, it's not like the playing before an audience. I think that what drives me ultimately is being creative at every moment.
The world could always use another psychedelic Kol Nidre.
I think it could.
I just even love that expression.
But when you say another one, hold on. When you say another one, were you perhaps referring to the Electric Prunes' first psychedelic Kol Nidre in 1964? I think you were. Yes.
I'm a terrible liar. So I would love to sit here and say, yes, it's in my notes, the 1964, no such luck,
Electric
let's put it that
prunes.
way. I did watch something online, which was a lot of fun, and that was you did a rooftop concert this summer. And as a diehard Beatles fan, I'm always happy to watch a rooftop concert. It evokes something wonderful.
Wenn ich gebe Kick auf dir, seh ich tausend Sinnen. In wurstet sich in als bei mir, ist leicht durchs Ziege finden. Bis die mit mir ist, mir geht, die ganze Welt ist meine. Jede Schuh ist am Minute, wenn ich kick in die Augen deine. Bei Tag, bei Nacht, heute tracht ich Mammerle von dir, zieh ich es, zieh ich Schluck, euch stehst die Fall, die euch mir.
I will say this, of course, what you do, both of you and musicians around the world, is valuable all the time, but especially at a time when people are hurting, to bring joy to people. I mean, I understand what the pandemic has done in terms of making a living and musicians, but what you've given people during this time is almost invaluable. The Rooftop Concert, seemed like you guys were having a pretty good time when you did that.
I'm curious how Lorin felt. I was a little stressed because I had to create the whole thing,
Right.
but I will say that was like the first time any of us had played music together live. At that point, there was probably 2 months since we had, and I didn't realize it at the time until I saw the film because I was so, concerned with making it happen. The insane energy of everyone and the frustration, and it all erupted. And what you don't know, we're on the roof. This was not only during the pandemic, this was during the quarantine, but it was also right when the curfew in New York, because of the riots, and there was right down on the street while we were doing it, there were people running by and protesting and police activity, and we had to move the concert, the filming ahead 2 hours so everyone could get home ahead of the curfew.
Wow.
It was insanity. But Lorin, what was your impression on it?
I mean, you're right in that when I watched it, everybody was just, kind of giving it everything that they had, and I think, it was like getting like a shot of some sort of adrenaline or something. And, like I hadn't, it's a very different thing to sit in your apartment and make a part that you're going to send to someone else, and and they're going to add something to it, than it is to performing live. It's a different kind of energy. And it's funny how as a performer you do turn that on, uh you know uh in for that, for the situation. And so that, Frank's right about that. Also, if I'm not mistaken, I rode my bike from Brooklyn for that, which it's like I've been on a subway like maybe twice, since March, and the rest of the time I've been riding my bike across the bridge. So so also, the idea that the idea of going to a gig on my bike is like something that until this whole thing, it's like I never did it before. And now now, for instance, YIVO, the Center for Jewish History, has started. We've started going back to work in shifts, in small shifts. So I ride my bike there. I ride my bike to the physical therapist, and such. So um, so it's like you do what you need to do. I guess.
I have to believe, I don't have it on strict authority, but I have to believe that when the Beatles did their rooftop concert, they probably did not arrive at Apple on their bikes. And just
Yeah,
taking a wild guess there.
probably not. But recently, interestingly enough, someone sent around 2 hours of film of the Beatles around the time of that rooftop concert in the studio, working on the material.
Yeah.
And the timing, couldn't have been nicer because, here we are all trapped here, and to see,
Mhm.
these guys, and also the idea that this mythology about them, and that they were, didn't like each other and all this kind
Right.
of stuff, and you see that in this period that they're just all collaborating and having, like, just like doing great stuff, just in their workplace.
Right.
So that was really inspiring.
We're talking today with Lorin Sklamberg and Frank London of the Klezmatics in another edition of the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene live program. And if you would be so kind, there is a place on the NYTF website at nytf.org/donate. The Yiddish Theater Folksbiene is one of many wonderful artistic institutions in New York, obviously struggling during this time of the pandemic. And if you should be so kind to make a donation, we all would obviously very much appreciate that. Lorin, when the band was formed in 1986, when you talk about it with friends, colleagues, family, was the reaction kind of like, oh, of course, this is naturally a place that you would go to. You've had these other interests in other types of music, and there is a thirst for klezmer music? Or was the reaction, are you sure you want to do this?
Well, the thing was that I came from somewhat of a background in playing at least instrumental tunes. If I didn't grow up uh, singing Yiddish songs or speaking Yiddish, but I was in a band in Los Angeles when I was in high school that played some Yiddish dance tunes. We were kind of the only band in LA that was actually playing for dancing in that way. I mean, mostly Israeli stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
but we were kind of uh, ahead of the when people talk about the resurgence of klezmer music. It was a little bit early in that time. So the it's not like the idea never occurred to me, but I was kind of had my mind on other things. So um, I had met Frank at a rehearsal of Zlatny State brass band, and later ran into him at at Mogador, Moroccan restaurant on St. Mark's Place, and he asked me if I'd be interested in being in a klezmer band, and I said, yeah, sounds like fun, way to make a little extra, money. I assumed that he meant for playing, for playing simchas or whatever. Uh, but you know, um, I didn't I didn't think of it as anything more than that. I didn't realize it was going to be my major, musical focus. And people's reactions, to me doing that weren't exactly. I wasn't exactly, surprised. Like, why would you do that? But it was a good time to be doing that because of the general kind of explosion of people branching out and trying new things around the East Village and around the music scene. So it was the timing and the luck of the people who got involved. You know it was fortuitous.
Frank, some notion for you back at that time of what you expected this to be or what you could have dreamed it would be?
I don't think there's any way that I could have ever imagined what it would turn out to be when we first started the Klezmatics. And looking back on it 35 years later, I in every way, both what it's done for me and my career and the focus and on the world and on the world of Jewish and Yiddish, I think there's not any way I could have predicted it. Um, I want to tell you just a short little anecdote about kind of the backstory. So I did not grow up with any Yiddish music or culture in my life or language. Jewish, yes, but the classic 1950s and 60s Long Island Reformed Jewish, which was a very American sort of cultural experience. And I use the word cultural uh, with all facetiousness because there was really nothing cultural about it. Um, and looking back, I have discovered that the two uh, uh, momenti mori of Yiddish culture in my entire childhood, which I didn't understand what they were, was a single 45 RPM record, the only, in our collection of rock and roll 45s, of Mickey Katz doing a bad Yiddish parody of "You Belong to Me," flip side of "Feet Up, Pat 'em on the Pippic." I had no idea what Pippic was. I had no idea. So that and a copy of Leo Roston's "The Education of Hyman Kaplan." These and only later did I realize where these fit in. That was the only thing. I get to college. I'm playing all sorts of music. I get introduced to a group of musicians and music playing klezmer. We ended up forming the Klezmer Conservatory band, dedicated to kind of recreating this old music. That was my early education. That starts in 1980. I come to New York in 85, and by 86 we start the Klezmatics. And as Lorin said, we just thought we would play simchas and make some money and have fun because we all like the music. We get our first big gig in Europe in 1988. We go to Germany for a festival, and a number of things happen. First of all, we are realized that we are being picked to be the face of klezmer and Yiddish music in the now newly nascent world music scene, and that's a whole nother story. But that's who we are. Um, and then the people who put on the festival also are a record label and a booking agent. And they say to us, if you make records, we will put them out and we'll book you on tours, which they did, Piranha Music. And the famous moment is where the head of that, Borkowski Akbar, says to the Klezmatics, he says, you know, you guys are young gals, you people are young, you're from New York, you have all these other influences. Why don't you put your own spin on the music as opposed to just copying it? And basically he's saying, if you do that, we'll support you. So that happened. And in 1990, when we put out Rhythm and Jews, it just changed everything. And our whole goal from that point in every step forward is to put ourselves into the music and the culture. And I just want to take one moment to kind of tie it together with you all, but with the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene, and the scene at that time when we came into it. Because being young, and especially me, kind of, you know, arrogant and naive as most young people are, I had no idea the history and the culture. And very early on, because we were doing this, I very early on met Zalman Mlotek, director, and Adrian Cooper, the late Adrian Cooper, the great singer, actress, activist, teacher, and dear friend. And so we've known them for nigh on 35, 40 years. And it's very interesting how, where we met and how we influenced each other, because just to put it overly simple, and it's not this simple, they both grew up totally enmeshed, enriched, or what's the word I'm looking for, in this tradition and culture, and they have so much knowledge, and they bring so much. And in many ways, they were the people keeping it alive in that very difficult transition period where the older generation was passing on and the younger generation was going elsewhere. And they were both performing it, doing it with integrity and knowledge. And they taught us, like Adrian in particular, taught us so many of the songs that have become the Klezmatics anthems, like Alla Breeder, a socialist Yiddish anthem, or Schneerla Perla, a song about looking through a Jewish lens at bringing like redemption to the world. They taught us this, and we learned so much. But I also think in our way, we taught them things we because we were being ourselves and not so tied to the tradition, and we were finding our own way. I think we encouraged them to stretch and start doing things in a more creative way. And it's been an incredible symbiosis, and it lasted, well, with Adrian until her passing and beyond, and with Zalman to this day, because we are still, well, we're talking to you, and I personally am still planning events, a Yiddish Cuban opera, other musical Yiddish theater events with the Folksbiene. So it's really an incredible two-way street, and we're so indebted to Zalman, to the Folksbiene, to Adrian for everything they taught us and for tying us. And now, 40 years later, I feel like I'm part of the tradition. I didn't feel like that. I felt like a visitor for at least the first 25 years of it.
Well, one of the beautiful parts of both of your careers is the whole notion of collaboration and working in other types of music. We'll get to that in just a second, but for both of you, and this might get a little bit into the weeds, but here we go. First for you, Lorin, aside from the texts and the Yiddish language, is there something about a piece of music that you can look at and specify, oh, that's really a Yiddish piece of music? Sure, it sounds a bit like other Eastern European music. You did a lot of work in Balkan music, but there's something specific, maybe a key change, maybe a key in general. It's an A minor, it's an E minor, that really kind of puts its mark on a song that this has a Yiddish flavor to it, even before we get to the words.
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with music that's modal, that is modal, that is which is synagogue based, that is sort of a signifier, that you hear that, and it's neither major nor minor. It's not Western, and for me as a singer, it's like the words are kind of equal. It's like I'm it's like with the band, early on, we sort of had a kind of an agreement that as songs became more important to what we were doing, that we would only sing things that we cared about or that had some sort of personal resonance for us. So so Frank was talking about Adrian with with those particular songs. My exposure to those particular songs was I heard them and I said, well, I know that there are all these sort of chestnuts that people do over and over and over again, but like, what about why don't people know these songs? Why it's like I there was a documentary about about Linda Ronstadt. I actually went to see it with Adrian's daughter. Went to a very practically empty movie theater to see it, and she talks about how, as far as what she's saying, that this, when she would hear songs, she said, the reason, the way I pick the songs that I'm going to sing is that I feel like I will die if I don't sing them. And, I don't think I feel anything that extreme, but I think that I'm, really, sing things that that I want to sing that have some sort of personal resonance. And I think that that's, part of the thing about what makes something sound Yiddish to me, is that some sort of, either, in addition, musically, either something that strikes me emotionally, um, I would say, in addition to the sort of the modal thing. um,
Mhm.
you know and very often, if you take a piece of music and it, you separate it from the text and you listen to the tune, um, it's like, pretty, most of the time you can say that that's a Jewish tune, even if you can't necessarily articulate what it is that makes it Jewish, other than a modality. And there are
Mhm.
plenty of Jewish tunes that borrow from other places.
That's the beauty of music, the borrowing, not stealing, of course, the borrowing of different
Yeah.
themes and influences and genres. That's one of the most beautiful parts. Frank, your career and the people that you've played with is beyond eclectic. I love any sentence that includes David Byrne, LL Cool J, and a personal favorite, They Might Be Giants. Is there
I
something?
love throwing Itzhak Perlman and Michael Tilson Thomas into that same sentence. It always rounds it off.
They're pretty good too. I've heard they're okay. They're pretty good.
Yeah.
Is there a particular muscle that you have to flex when you're playing music for the Klezmatics, as opposed to playing a different type of music, or is it all part of essentially one big family?
The key for me to everything. How's that? How's that for a start of a sentence? The key to
I need to
everything.
get a pencil here.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
gonna.
No, it's easy. The key is listening. Just flat out listening. In music, in life, in a conversation, in politics, in everything. And uh, by listening really deeply, musically, is what enables me to go from a salsa stage with Celia Cruz to a classical stage with Tilson Thomas or Lamont Young, to an avant-garde stage with John Zorn, to a punk stage with Iggy Pop, to a Balkan stage with Esma Rajepova, to an African stage with Angelique Kidjo. And it's just listening, understanding that if you listen, you can figure out the rules of the language that they are speaking, not the language itself, but the musical language, which, by the way, gets back to your point of your question to Lorin about what makes the music Jewish. And I'd like to talk about that. But you listen, and as best as you can, learn what to do to be a part of it. So your question was about the klezmatics, and there's not really a particular answer except that um, it's listening to those people. But the interesting thing is, having played with more or less the same six people for almost 35 years. I mean, the youngest, newest member of our band is Richie Barshay, and he's already been in the band for 15 years or something like that. And of the six Klezmatics, four of us were on our first recording. So, we've been playing together so long that it's a very interesting way we listen to each other, because we both know what everyone is going to do, but we actually structured the band in many ways musically around the idea that we always have to listen to each other. A lot of our arrangements are built in freedom and flexibility, and things can make left and right turns at different points that aren't expected, and then all of a sudden go to the parts of the text that we have to do, which are very well composed and practiced, and we can just make these sharp right and left turns. And so it's the same as being any stage with any musicians in terms of listening deeply, but it's with a group where we have this incredible common language.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, we could give a concert. When we went to that concert this summer in Connecticut, we hadn't played together in 3 or 4 months. We walked on stage and played an hour-and-a-half concert without thinking about it. But we actually have 4 or 5 concert programs of about almost an hour-and-a-half, 2 hours each, which we can basically do with either no rehearsal or a little touch-up in a sound check. So we have this incredible repertoire and history, and it's amazing. So we have an entire Hanukkah show. We have an entire with Woody Guthrie songs. We have an entire Woody Guthrie show. We have an entire Passover liberation show with the Prince of Kosher Gospel, Joshua Nelson. We have, it goes on. And so it's an incredible ability to just take it and be present. And it's great.
I've seen a number of your shows, and I've seen the Guthrie show. I grew up in a household where Woody Guthrie was, he was on the musical Mount Rushmore, and so the Guthrie show is terrific. I mentioned collaboration earlier, and you've both had such interesting collaborations and projects throughout your career. Frank, we'll start with you. Obviously, can't mention all of them, but one of them that I found particularly interesting is, since I studied at first high school and then a college student in what we now call the former Soviet Union back in the 1970s, and then returned as a musician to help lead services and do some music for emerging congregations after the fall of communism in the 1990s. You did a musical theater piece about the Soviet Yiddish theater called Green Violin. Tell us a little bit about that, how that came to be.
Great. Happy to. And by the way, my collaborator on that, Elise Thoron, who's also the writer of Hatue, Memory of Fire, which is my Yiddish Cuban opera, keeps on saying that Green Violin is something for the Folksbiene to look at one day, so maybe that'll happen.
That was an unprompted pitch by me. Let's put it that way.
Unprompted pitch. I respond. And before I answer, I want to throw just a different aside to something you said in the question. And then I'll get back to the question. One of the many historical things that you couldn't plan about the Klezmatics career that happened, couldn't have planned it, is the fact that we broke onto the world stage in 1988 in this concert in Germany. The wall falls down in 1989, and being that we're already posited as the Klezmer Yiddish band and as a young political one, and a Jew positive one, and a gay positive one, and all these things, we are among the first band playing Jewish music that goes into all these former Soviet countries. In 1990, 91, 92, we're touring. We do a tour of East Germany, while at the end of it being East Germany, we go into Hungary, where we have the most incredible concert maybe of the Klezmatics career. You remember that first concert in Hungary, Lorin?
Yeah,
Thousands
sure.
of people in like an airplane hangar, and the line that will never leave my head. Afterward, this Jewish Hungarian guy about our age in his 20s comes up to me and he says, this concert was the first time I ever felt that being Jewish was simply something you could feel good about. With all the history, with the Holocaust, with the Soviets, with anti-Semitism, and I was like, thank God. So former Czechoslovakia. So when you talk about you going into, and Russia, we went, I forget, Lorin, when we first started teaching at workshops in Moscow and St. Petersburg, in Crimea. So just like you were going into the former Soviet Union as a sort of emissary and ambassador of Jewishness, we were also, but from a Yiddishness and a musical point of view. So that's a little aside. I'm sorry, but
No, that's okay. That's a great story. I mean, the places
I'll try to
you'll
keep
go.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll try to keep the green violin story short. It actually came out from Elise Thoron, who's a writer, director. No, a writer. Well, she's both, but she's a writer in this case. And Rebecca Teichman, who, just to make a full circle, created and directed the show Indecent, for which she won a Tony for Best Director, and which Lisa Gutkin, our violinist, co-wrote the music. So that's just a full circle there. So they got commissioned to put together a piece about the Goset, the Soviet Yiddish theater, its main actor, Solomon Michoels, and the guy who happened to paint all the sets for the Goset, some guy named Marc Chagall. And and it was based off a famous backdrop he made for this Goset of the Yiddish theater, and they made an entire, and it shows a green violinist, but they named the piece Green Violin, and it's the story of these two characters, Chagall and Michoels, one of whom stayed in the Soviet Union and the other whom left and became a refugee, and what happened, and Michoels eventually gets killed by Stalin, and Chagall leaves, but his heart is always broken to a certain extent that he can't go back. And we had the pleasure of not only doing that in Philadelphia, and it won some awards, but we did another version of it in St. Petersburg. And it was really a joy for me in that piece because, and here's the fun part, because it was a musical about a theater troupe. We told the story, but in it we framed three famous Yiddish theater productions. We recreated scenes, famous The Agents by, I'm pretty sure, my brain is off, I think it's Isaac Bashevis Singer who wrote The Agents. If I'm wrong, I'll shoot myself. The Travels of Benjamin III by Menachem Mendel Sforim, and their famous Yiddish version of King Lear, König Lear, with the famous line translated and improved into Yiddish. And I remember talking to Elise, this is another great moment, when we were first working on it, and I said, because we did this show, and this goes to a big question about doing Yiddish theater. Do you do it in Yiddish? Do you do it in English? In Green Violin, we decided to do the whole thing in English. And so I said to her, so for The Agents, do you have an English translation of The Agent? She goes, yes, I do. And I said, and for The Travels of Benjamin III, do you have an English for that? She, yes. And I said, and for the König Lear, for the King Lear, do you have an English translation of the Yiddish? And she looks at me, it's like, yeah, it's called Shakespeare. So it was amazing because, and this maybe ties it all together, Yiddish theater in the 20s and 30s was the most radical theater on the planet.
Ziele, sein Bogen schießt herab hinein, lässt mit sich nicht spielen. Das Leben verschwindet, als wie Rauch in Wind. Kein Fleisch mag jemand drinnen. Kein Gut noch Schatz bei dem Tod gefinnen Platz. Du musst mit ihm von hinnen.
Or amongst the most radical. I can't, you never, nothing is the most, but amongst it. It was so modern. They say that when the Ghost had performed in Yiddish, the audience, half the audience didn't even speak Yiddish. They were non-Jewish Russians, and they just came for the theatrical experience. And this is before subtitles or super titles. It was so cutting edge, and I've tried to capture that feeling in so many of the Yiddish theater works I've done. I did an adaptation of A Night in the Old Marketplace, Peretz's great modernist Yiddish theater play from 1918, which is radical. And we've done that for the Folksbiene, and trying to recapture the fact that Yiddish theater, which became over the years a thing of nostalgia, because Yiddish culture was dying, because people were trying to look back at the old country, as klezmer was. This goes back to what Lorin was saying about how the Klezmatics decided to only sing songs that we care about, because for many of us, Yiddish music, Yiddish theater was an instrument of nostalgia, and nostalgia thing, and it was also a kitschy thing. Shtick is a big part of this, and these are wonderful things, but they don't interest us at heart. And so, but the Yiddish music and the Yiddish theater of 100 years ago was not nostalgic, and it was not kitschy. It was cutting edge. It was political. It was social, and that's why I think that's why Lorin is an archivist, and I'm an amateur ethnomusicologist, and we go back to these old sources to make new things, because we connect with the power that came out of Yiddish culture 100 years ago.
We're talking with Lorin Sklamberg and Frank London of the Klezmatics here on the latest edition of the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene Live program. If you'd like to make a contribution, we would so appreciate that to one of the great artistic institutions in New York City, the Folksbiene, at the website nytf.org/donate. Lorin, among the many collaborations you've done, one that stood out to me as someone who's of Eastern European Jewish background, I could sit and listen to Irish/Scottish/Celtic music all day. And when for my 50th birthday, my wife took me to Scotland because of my favorite movie, a Scottish movie named Local Hero, with amazing Scottish music by Mark Knopfler. Yeah. One of the collaborations that stood out for me was your collaboration in Yiddish and Irish song traditions.
Yeah, with Mishkin.
Yeah. Tell me a little about that. When was that, and how that came to be, and what you got out of it?
It was after Susan had been involved with our work with Woody Guthrie lyrics, and we'd done two recordings, and she toured with us in that program, and the two of us just love singing together, and so we decided that we wanted to do something that explored both of our musical folk heritages as far as songs go. And through my work at YIVO, there had been a songbook published posthumously of that Ruth Rubin had been preparing for publication when she passed away, and it took several years for it to finally be printed. But we sort of, that was sitting there, and it was sort of like, with other songs of, to use a Klezmatics as an example, where here was like a treasure trove of songs that basically no one knew. So so we decided to start, looking at songs. Virtually all of the Yiddish songs come from that collection of Ruth Rubin. The Irish songs were a combinations of things that, that Susan found. And we already had this sort of connection between Irish and Yiddish music in the band, because both Lisa and Matt Dario, our reed player, were both also in the Irish music scene, and were in a band together and such. And in fact, it was through them, I think, that we met Susan. So the two of us just started, collecting material and going to Susan's apartment and singing together and figuring out ways to sort of interweave. And we found that, that that the Jews and the Irish have had the same sort of suffering, because a lot of the songs are not happy ones. So so we found ways of combining them, and that's how it came to be. That's kind of the simple story. Susan, we were looking for, at the time there was still a bit of a recording industry. I mean, I don't know what's going on now. There's not, everything is kind of a mess, right? So at that time, it was kind of the tail end of being able to actually make a record for a company. And we had asked some people, and we couldn't find anyone who wanted to put it out, which was kind of crazy, because, it's like you would think, right? So she had made some records for this label called World Village, and she happened to offhandedly mention it to him, and she said, "But I don't know who's going to put it out." He said, "I am." And so he ended up putting it out, and we ended up calling it Saints and Tzaddiks.
Nice.
Yeah, and yeah, so that was just a fortuitous and wonderful experience for me, and for the two of us.
In the mid-90s, I was dating a woman who lived in Windsor, Ontario. This is before I was married. And Windsor, Ontario, and she takes me to see in Windsor a Yiddish group from Winnipeg. And I remember thinking, Yiddish music in Winnipeg. Now, I'd never been to Winnipeg, but
that would be Finjan.
Yeah. So, and it was spectacular, and it was great. And so my question to you first, Lorin, and then Frank, and you guys alluded to it with the trips to the Eastern Europe, and especially after the fall of communism, and being there at that time, it must have been memorable. But either from that, or is there another time, Lorin, where once the group is established and you're traveling the world, is there a moment and a place of, wow, I can't believe that we formed this band, it's found its place, and all of a sudden I'm here playing this type of music for this audience that was either surprising to you or really gave you a moment where you could step back for a second and say, look around like, wow, I'm never going to forget this?
Well, China.
I would qualify.
I mean, I would. I try to think, like where we've been, where like we were really, really, really foreign, like where it's like not even a kernel of, of course when we were in Shanghai, and Shanghai was one of the places where Jews went, during the war, right?
Right.
But other than than that, I would, I would say that, that's the furthest, I guess it's the furthest we've been away from home. And even so, uh, it was a cool trip because we were brought by uh, two English speaking colleges, universities, um, and you know, I mean, we made friends and had this sort of interactive experience with them, which was really great. And the thing is that music is a great, it's a great way of meeting and having, exchanges with people. And I would say that for me, that was probably the
It is the international language. There's no question about it. Frank, for you, again, you alluded a little bit earlier to some of those shows in Eastern Europe, but is there perhaps a first moment or really the moment for you when you look back that, wow, we're not in Kansas anymore?
Well, yeah, my answer is almost the opposite of Lorin's. He was looking for the furthest, most exotic place, and most, or you said most different, and certainly China is one of the most different culturally. Although you remember we did that thing with the students where we asked them to teach us one of their folk songs, and then we on the spot made a klezmer version of this Chinese folk song and had them singing along, which
yeah,
was
yeah,
really
sure.
which was really fun. I bet you could probably think of the song. Um, and just from that point of view, I mean, on the same vein, when I went to Korea, this is not with the Klezmatics, but I went there. I was invited by Seoul National University, and I was teaching klezmer music to a group of traditional Korean musicians. So a traditional Korean ensemble playing klezmer music. But I have to say, there are too many moments along the way where I've said, I can't believe I'm here. And just, it's almost always with Baruch Hashem kind of thing. Thank God. And it's just so many things. And I'll just list some of them because they all add up. I mean, our first concert in Europe, in Germany, no, I had been to Germany once before with a jazz group, but going there as a Jewish group, as an outwardly gay New York Jewish group, and you just even from the orthography, and there was a lot more of what they call Plattdeutsch, the old German letters, you just see Nazi, 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 Nazi everywhere, and you're like, ah, ah. And of course, at that period, they were the most open because they had really been, dealing with this and studying it. But it's just like, but that was one, to be playing and that was an open air outdoor free concert, so thousands of people there. But a few years later, our first time playing in Krakow was different, and I almost started to cry. It was at the Krakow Festival of Jewish Culture, because in certain ways, and this is not really true, but it's got truth in it, when you're in Germany, the mind thinks about the destruction of Jewish culture and of Jewish life. But in Krakow, Germany was never really, I mean, this is a longer discussion. I'm oversimplifying. Don't correct me because I know how false this is. But Yiddish culture was not the dominant Jewish culture in Germany. Lorin's done a lot of projects with Yiddish culture from Berlin. We know that exists. But when we played in Krakow, and you go there and you see the buildings, and we were playing in Kazimierz, which was the Jewish quarter, and you see the Yiddish writing on the walls on plaques and the Yiddish cemetery and everything, and you realize that this is where the culture that we're playing was from, and it's not there anymore. And at first it was like the ruins, and then with a few years, almost worse, it became the Disneyland of Yiddish culture.
Right.
So that was like, that had its own tragic moment. But a very different experience was starting, just as one example of many, the first time we played at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, for example, to just be on a stage. And I remember the feeling that klezmer and Yiddish music had come back to just being one of many American music traditions, living American music traditions, and to be contextualized by, and here's the greatest Irish band, and here's a group of Senegalese drummers, and here's, all these things, and here we are, and to be part of this world community, that moment. Or, and now I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I know it exists, and maybe Lorin can help me think of one, when we've been called to contribute our voice in Yiddish to different social justice movements, winning a GLAMA award, the Gay and Lesbian, what's the first A for?
American
American Music Awards, to be recognized for our work, to be recognized for our work both in the community, getting, let's say, a Lifetime Achievement Award from YIVO, but also to be recognized for our work that has nothing to do with Yiddish or Jewish per se, but our activism in social causes, in different things. Again, to feel like we made a difference. Of course, the Grammys were a moment like, I can't believe I'm here. That's, that's it kind of, and it's kind of funny because I wasn't going to go to LA because you have to fly out on your own. You don't get paid. I had to turn down work to go there. And I said, I'm not going to go. And my wife and daughter said, you have to go. And thank God they did. And that moment of hearing our name called, and so ultimately it's like a series of these moments, each one having its own particular resonance, sometimes by how foreign we are and yet we're communicating. Sometimes, and sometimes it's even, it's the thing, and the last thing, innumerable concerts, especially early on in our career in the 80s and early 90s, when a Klezmatics concert would have an audience literally from 8 to 80, and actually from 2 to 90. And you had people who would come up and say, I grew up with this music. I love hearing you play it. It brings me back, and tell us their life story. To people who had never heard it, to people who said, oh, this is the music that my parents or my grandparents played for me. And finally realizing after many years that the Klezmatics had established ourselves as part of what they say in Yiddish, the golden akate, the golden
chain.
Chain. And it's the chain is our tradition, and it's made up of links tying it from past, present to future, and that we have established ourselves as one of the links in this beautiful, glorious chain of Yiddish culture. And we have clearly taken from all those who came before us, put our stamp on it, and gladly see how our work has influenced next generations and next generations after that. And I think just that fact at the end of the day is the one that and I never expected that. And I think that was part of your question, is the thing that you didn't expect. We didn't go into it saying, we're going to do this, we're going to reclaim Yiddish music, we're going to make a statement. We just did it because we love doing it, and it's important to us. And to realize that we've become part of this great tradition. Zalman was born into it. Adrian was born into it. Eleanor Risa was born into it. And thank God they have continued it and moved it forward. We weren't necessarily born into it, but we've become part of that, and that's very satisfying.
Lorin, I'll give you the final word as we wrap up. What Frank says is absolutely correct. You've taken what was in the past. You have a great history as a band, but the music continues, both individually and as a band and with collaborations. Can you describe that sense of pride that of the place that the Klezmatics have had and continue to have in this music and in this culture?
It's my, well, for me, it's like my my life. It's like my life is like focused on this. But also, like the amount of gratitude I have for, people actually taking us to heart, and that, that it's enabled us to, to make friends all over the world, both in terms of fans, but also in terms of people we've gotten to work with. And, just it just means, so much to have, been, had the opportunity to do this for so long, and that we're not done. It's still something we're still in the middle of it.
That's the beautiful part. We're not done. Our guests today have been Lorin Sklamberg and Frank London, two of the founding members of the Klezmatics. We've heard some of their music today during this conversation. And do yourself a favor. It's always a good time to listen to the music of the Klezmatics and the music of these two gentlemen individually and as part of collaborations, and certainly as part of the Klezmatics. It's always a good time. But up during a pandemic, when we need some lifting, some spiritual lifting, music plays a central role. I know it does in this household, and it does in households across the New York area and across the country and around the world. Once again, this has been the latest program for the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene Live program. And if you'd be so generous as to give a little contribution, obviously, this is one of the cultural institutions in New York that is suffering during this time of the pandemic. We would certainly appreciate it if you go to the website, nytf.org/donate. Frank and Lorin, we look forward to seeing more from you online, and we certainly look forward to seeing you in person performing at the appropriate time. Thank you so much for your time today.
Schönen Dank.
Thanks, bud.
Sich schlaf, euch stehst die Pfadi I give up, bis die sie's, und sie's wie ein Stück Sieger. Wenn die was mit nur gelost, sie beißige dich aufstiegen, weil die bist schön, in die hast Tränen, in die Augen bräune Farben, die Bäckerlauf, die Lippelauf, na kenn doch mal mehr Fall, sie starben, neu Gewalt, bis die siehst, wie er steht,
Thank you very much, Bud, Lorin, and Frank. That was very insightful. And thank you to those of you at home who've made a donation. If you haven't given a little something yet, please go to nytf.org today and click on that donate button. And now, please give a warm welcome to the Klezmer doo-wop stylings of Malky and the Malkettes.